The fluorescent lights of Willow Creek Elementary buzzed like distant thunder, casting a sterile glow over the third-grade classroom. 9-year-old Zoe Ramirez clutched her desk, her small face paling as the world tilted sideways. The teacher, Mrs. Harlan, was mid-sentence about fractions when Zoe's pencil clattered to the floor, followed by her body slumping forward in a heap. Gasps rippled through the room, children frozen in wide-eyed shock, the metallic tang of fear sharpening the air. "Zoe! Oh God! Someone call 911!" Mrs. Harlan's voice cracked as she knelt, pressing fingers to the girl's neck. Zoe's breaths came shallow, ragged, her skin clammy under the woman's touch. Paramedics arrived in a blur of sirens and urgency, wheeling her out on a stretcher, while the class watched from the windows, the autumn leaves swirling like forgotten worries outside. Mark Holloway gripped the steering wheel of his battered pickup, the engine rumbling low as he sped toward the hospital. At 47, he carried the weight of too many miles in his broad shoulders and the faint scars crisscrossing his knuckles, reminders of a life forged in the roar of Harleys and the code of the Iron Promise Motorcycle Club. He'd been Zoe's stepdad for 3 years, ever since her mother, Lena, had pulled him from the shadows of his wandering days with a quiet plea for stability. Zoe wasn't his blood, but she'd claimed his heart with her gap-toothed smiles and endless questions about the tattoos snaking up his arms. Now, the call from the school had shattered his afternoon shift at the auto shop, the smell of oil and rubber still clinging to his flannel shirt. He burst through the emergency room doors of Santa Esperanza Hospital, the antiseptic bite hitting him like a slap. Nurses in crisp uniforms darted past, their footsteps echoing off linoleum floors that gleamed under harsh lights. "Zoe Ramirez!" Mark demanded at the desk, his voice gravelly from years of shouting over engine noise. The receptionist glanced up, her expression softening with practiced sympathy. "Family room, sir. Doctor's with her now." He paced the sterile hallway, fists clenched, the distant beeps of monitors mocking his helplessness. Minutes stretched into an eternity until a doctor emerged, Dr. Elena Vasquez, her white coat rumpled, eyes weary behind wire-rimmed glasses. "Mr. Holloway," she said, guiding him to a quiet corner where vinyl chairs sagged under invisible burdens. "Zoe's stable for now, but it's serious. She collapsed from internal bleeding, likely a ruptured vessel, possibly tied to a rare condition we've only begun to scan for. Her blood type. It's AB negative with a specific antigen marker. Extremely rare. Less than 1% of the population carries it. We've started a transfusion from our reserves, but they're low. We need donors, and fast. Without compatible blood, she won't make it through the night." Mark's world narrowed to a pinpoint, the doctor's words echoing like exhaust fumes in his skull. AB negative, the same ghost that had haunted him since his army days, when a buddy bled out in a dusty Afghan outpost because no one matched. He'd sworn then, in the heat of loss, to never let silence claim another life he could save. Zoe, with her wild curls and dreams of riding on the back of his bike one day, deserved more than statistics. He nodded, resolve hardening like cooling metal. "I'll donate. Test me first." The nurse led him to a curtained bay, the needle's prick a minor sting against the storm inside. But as the results came back, negative despite his type, Mark's jaw tightened. He pulled out his old club radio from his jacket pocket, the leather creased from years of loyal service. The Iron Promise wasn't just a club, it was a brotherhood bound by oaths older than the rusted chains on their bikes. He'd walked away from the rides 5 years back, trading patch for family life. But the promise lingered like engine grease under nails. With a deep breath, he keyed the mic, his voice steady over the static-laced airwaves. "This is Mark Holloway, Iron Promise Charter. Got a code red. Little girl, 9 years old, my stepdaughter Zoe. She's crashing at Santa Esperanza. Needs AB negative with the rare marker. Hospitals across the state. Get tested, brothers. Ride now. No questions, no delays." Static crackled. Then voices flooded in. Gruff affirmations from outposts in the dusty valleys and rain-slicked coasts. Jax, the grizzled president who'd pulled Mark from a bar fight a decade ago, responded first. "We're mobilizing. Every chapter. Hold the line, brother." Mark pocketed the radio, staring out the window at the parking lot where sodium lamps flickered to life against the encroaching dusk. The first Harleys growled in the distance, headlights piercing the twilight like beacons of forgotten vows. Back in Zoe's room, the monitors hummed a fragile rhythm, her tiny form dwarfed by the bed's white sheets. Lena arrived in a whirlwind of tears, collapsing into Mark's arms, her perfume mixing with the hospital's chill. "She was fine this morning," she whispered, voice breaking. "Singing that song about the open road you taught her." Mark held her close, his calloused hand stroking her back, but his eyes stayed on the door. The club had fractured him once, old grudges, a botched run that cost lives. But this was redemption's call, a chance to stitch the pieces with action. Outside, the convoy began to assemble. Engines revved in a symphony of thunder, tires crunching gravel as riders from forgotten corners converged. There was Tommy Bear Rollins, the ex-Marine with a prosthetic leg, who'd lost his own daughter to illness and now channeled grief into guardianship. Beside him, Rico Valdez, the club's quiet mechanic, whose hands shook not from fear but from the weight of unspoken loyalties. They weren't saints. Tattoos hid regrets. Leathers concealed scars from battles with crooked lawmen and inner demons, but they rode for the promise, one for all, blood or not. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in bruised purples, the first wave pulled into the hospital lot. Nurses paused mid-stride, staring at the sea of chrome and denim spilling from machines that vibrated the ground. Mark stepped out to meet them, the cool evening air carrying the scent of exhaust and determination. Jax dismounted, clasping Mark's forearm in a grip that spoke volumes. "Told you the road always calls back," he rumbled, his salt and pepper beard framing a rare smile. "We're here. All of us." Inside, Dr. Vasquez watched from a window, her skepticism melting into awe as lines formed at testing stations, not just at Santa Esperanza. But reports trickled in from clinics an hour away, then two. Radios buzzed with updates, a dozen riders en route from the border towns, more from the mountain passes. Zoe's condition teetered, the transfusion buying time, but the clock ticked mercilessly. Mark returned to her bedside, taking her limp hand in his. "Hang on, kiddo," he murmured, the words a vow etched in his soul. "The family's coming, and when they do, nothing stops us." The room filled with the low hum of approaching thunder, a promise unfolding in the night, a tapestry of loyalty weaving through the cracks of a cynical world, where one girl's fight could mend the unbreakable bonds of chosen kin. If you're watching this and feeling that pull in your chest, the raw beat of brotherhood calling across the miles, stick around. The ride's just beginning, and Zoe's story is far from over. What would you do for the ones who aren't blood, but feel like they are? The hospital parking lot transformed into a makeshift rally under the sodium glow of street lamps, the air thick with the acrid bite of cooling engines and the faint ozone of impending rain. Harleys lined up like silent sentinels, their chrome flanks reflecting the flicker of brake lights from incoming riders. Mark stood at the edge of the asphalt, arms crossed over his leather vest. The old iron promise patch faded but unyielding, a relic from days when the road was his confessor. Jax clapped a heavy hand on his shoulder, the gesture grounding him amid the swell of denim-clad figures dismounting with purposeful strides. "How many we got so far?" Mark asked, his voice low, eyes scanning the growing throng. 20 here, more rolling in from the East Run," Jax replied, his gravelly tone cutting through the murmurs. The club president, pushing 60 with a frame built like weathered oak, had seen too many sunrises over dusty horizons to flinch at crises. He'd founded Iron Promise in the shadow of forgotten wars, binding misfits with a creed: honor the oath, protect the pack. Tonight, that oath echoed in the rumble fading to quiet resolve. Nurses emerged from the side doors, clipboards in hand, their initial wariness giving way to organized efficiency as testing stations sprouted in the emergency bay, folding chairs, IV kits glinting under portable lights, the sharp scent of alcohol swabs mingling with exhaust. Tommy Bear Rollins lumbered forward first, rolling up his sleeve to reveal a forearm etched with faded ink from his Marine days. A compass rose pointing true north, toward home and hearth lost too soon. His prosthetic leg clicked softly against the pavement as he settled into a chair, the medic drawing blood with a practiced jab. "For the kid," Bear muttered, his eyes distant, haunted by memories of a hospital room much like this one, where prayers had gone unanswered. Beside him, Rico Valdez fidgeted, his mechanic's hands, stained with grease that no scrub could erase, clenching and unclenching. Rico had patched more bikes than he could count, but this was no engine to fix. It was a fragile life, teetering on the edge. "She'll pull through," he said to no one in particular, more plea than prediction, as the needle pierced his vein. Inside, the corridors pulsed with a new rhythm. Dr. Vasquez coordinated the influx, her voice calm over the intercom, directing riders to satellite clinics in nearby towns where word had spread like wildfire through the club's encrypted channels. Reports crackled over Mark's radio, a dozen from the coastal chapters pulling into Riverton General, 5 more at the urgent care in Pine Hollow. The Brotherhood's reach stretched across state lines, a web of loyalty spun from barroom toasts and midnight confessions. But beneath the unity simmered old fractures, whispers of the night 5 years back, when a rival crew's ambush had splintered the club, leaving Mark walking away in bloodied silence. He'd vowed then to leave the life for Lena's sake, for Zoe's, yet here he was, the call pulling him back like gravity. Lena paced Zoe's room, her fingers twisting the hem of her sweater, the soft fabric worn from endless washes. The girl's chest rose and fell in shallow cadence, monitors casting green shadows across her face, pale, but for the flush of fever. "Mark, what if no one matches?" she whispered when he slipped in, the door clicking shut behind him. He knelt beside the bed, brushing a curl from Zoe's forehead. The touchlight as if she might shatter. "They will. The club's got ghosts and guardians alike. Someone's carrying it." His words were a shield, forged in the fires of past failures, but doubt gnawed at the edges. AB negative with the marker wasn't just rare. It was a needle in a haystack of highways. Outside, the tests rolled on. A young rider, fresh-faced with the club's prospect patch, came up negative, but slapped Mark's back with a grin. "Next one's got to be it, brother." Then came Carla Sparks Mendoza, the only woman in the inner circle, her braided hair tucked under a bandana scarred from a warehouse blaze she'd pulled 3 souls from years ago. Sparks donated without hesitation, her blood typing a close but incompatible match. "Damn close," the tech said, shaking her head. Frustration rippled through the group, engines idling impatiently as more arrived, tires crunching over fallen leaves, headlights sweeping the lot like searchlights. Jax pulled Mark aside near the ambulance dock, the cool night air carrying distant thunder. "Heard from the border run, they're delayed, roadblock up north, some sheriff sniffing around old beefs." Mark's jaw set, memories flashing of badges tarnished by backroom deals, the kind that turned justice into a joke. The club had clashed with corrupt enforcers before, protecting runs that fed orphanages and vet shelters, not the shadows some painted them in. "Keep 'em clear," Mark growled. "This ain't about scores, it's the girl." Jax nodded, keying his own radio to reroute the convoy through backroads, the static hissing like a shared secret. As midnight crept in, the lot swelled to 50 strong, a sea of vests emblazoned with the Iron Promise emblem, a clenched fist around a broken chain, symbol of bonds that time couldn't rust. A medic from a mobile unit called out a partial hit. One rider from the mountains, compatible but low volume. It bought hours. Transfused into Zoe's veins like liquid hope, but the doctors warned of the bleed's persistence. Lena joined Mark at the window, watching the vigil unfold. "They're all here." "For her," she breathed, awe softening her fear. Riders shared thermoses of black coffee, stories low and murmured, tales of lost rides, redeemed paths, binding them tighter in the wait. Then, a lone headlight pierced the darkness from the access road, cutting through the haze. The bike pulled up slow, its rider dismounting with a stiffness that spoke of old wounds. He was no stranger to the club, faces turned, murmurs rising like smoke. Vance Razor Kane, ex-rival, ghost from the fractured past, the man whose crew had crossed blades with Iron Promise in a turf war that left scars deeper than skin. Kane's eyes, shadowed under a worn cap, met Mark's across the lot. No words yet, just a nod toward the testing station, his jacket free of patches but heavy with unspoken history. The air thickened, loyalty tested against the pull of redemption. Would this enemy become savior, or unravel the fragile weave? Mark stepped forward, the gravel shifting under his boots, heart pounding like a V-twin at full throttle. Zoe's life hung on the line, and in the Brotherhood's code, even old foes could find grace under fire. The night deepened, engines silent now, all eyes on the man who might hold the key to survival, a promise reborn in the unlikeliest of hands. The gravel crunched under Vance Razor Kane's boots as he approached the testing station, the weight of 2 decades' grudges hanging in the air like exhaust fumes after a burnout. At 52, he moved with the deliberate caution of a man who'd outrun too many close calls. His frame leaned from years on the fringes, a faded scar tracing his jawline from the night iron promise and his old crew. The Shadow Reapers had clashed over a disputed route. That brawl had ended in shattered bottles and broken oaths, with Mark Holloway's glare burning into him across a rain-slicked parking lot. Now, here they stood, separated by folding tables and IV stands, the hum of generators underscoring the silence that stretched taut. Mark's fists clenched at his sides, the leather of his gloves creaking softly. He'd sworn off vengeance after the dust settled, burying the loss of his closest brother under layers of family life, but seeing Kane stirred the embers. Whispers rippled through the assembled riders. Bear's low growl, Sparks's sharp intake of breath, as Jack stepped forward, his presence a barrier of weathered authority. "Kane," Jack said, voice even, but edged like a knife's spine. "Didn't peg you for hospital runs. What's the play here?" Vance's eyes, steel grey under the brim of his cap, flicked to the hospital doors where shadows of nurses moved behind frosted glass. He shrugged off his jacket, revealing a plain black tee stretched over corded arms, no colours to claim allegiance. Heard the call on the open freaky, figured the kid's worth a prick. His tone was neutral, stripped of the old bravado, but Mark caught the flicker, the ghost of rivalry yielding to something raw. Kane had lost his own stake in the world years back, whispers said. A daughter taken by fever in a border clinic, no donors in sight. The road had hardened him into a lone wolf, scavenging gigs on the edges of legitimacy. But tonight, the pull of shared scars had drawn him from the shadows. The medic, a no-nonsense woman with a ponytail pulled tight, gestured to the chair without ceremony. "Arm out. We'll see if you're a match." Kane complied, rolling up his sleeve to expose veins mapped like forgotten highways. The needle slid in clean, blood flowing dark and steady into the vial, the room's portable lights casting long shadows that danced across his face. Riders watched, a circle of denim and resolve, the scent of coffee and cigarette smoke mingling with the metallic tang of the draw. Lena peered from the window above, her silhouette framed against the warmer glow of Zoe's room, where monitors beeped a fragile metronome. Minutes dragged like a slow wheelie, the tech's face unreadable as she ran the sample through the portable analyzer. Mark paced the lot's edge, boots scuffing against oil-stained pavement, his mind replaying the ambush's chaos, the roar of engines, the crack of fists, a brother's final gasp. Kane had walked away that night with blood on his hands, not iron promises, but close enough to taint the air between them. "Why now?" Mark finally asked, stopping short of the station, his voice a low rumble over the distant patter of rain starting to speckle the asphalt. Kane met his gaze, unflinching, as the machine whirred to a halt. "Roads change, Holloway. Lost my girl to the same silence no one showed. Figure this evens a score or two." The words landed heavy, not apology but acknowledgement, a bridge thrown across the chasm of old wars. Jax nodded subtly, his hand resting on Mark's shoulder, a silent command to hold the line. The club code demanded it. Oaths over origins, protection over payback. But trust was a rusted chain, and Mark felt the links strain. The tech looked up, her expression shifting from routine to revelation. "It's a match. Full compatibility. AB negative with the marker. We can start the draw immediately." A murmur swept the group, relief breaking like dawn through clouds, fists pumping in quiet triumph. Bear let out a whoop, clapping Rico on the back, while Sparks flashed a thumbs up toward the hospital. Kane's face remained stoic, but his shoulders eased a fraction as the medic prepped the line. the bag filling with the life-giving red that could anchor Zoe's fading pulse. Inside, Dr. Vasquez was alerted via radio, her steps quickening down the corridor. She paused at Zoe's bedside, checking the IV drip that now carried the club's partial donation, buying precious minutes. Lena clutched Mark's hand when he burst in, her eyes searching his. "They found someone?" she asked, voice threaded with hope, fragile as spider silk. He nodded, the weight lifting just enough to breathe. "Yeah. Bringing it now. She's got a fighting chance." Zoe stirred faintly under the sheets, her fingers twitching as if reaching for the light beyond the rain-streaked window, where the convoy's lights blurred into a constellation of loyalty. But as Kane settled into the donation chair, the real tension coiled. Jax pulled Mark aside again, rain now drumming steadily on the lot's overhang. "He's clean on the books. No warrants, no games. But if this is a ploy—" Mark shook his head, staring at the man who'd once been enemy number one. The draw completed, the bag handed off to a waiting courier on a club bike, engine firing up with a throaty growl that cut through the downpour. Kane rose, flexing his arm, the bandage a white flag in the dim light. "Tell the kid to ride strong," he said to no one, mounting his machine with a kickstand's metallic clink. Mark approached as the rain slicked his hair, words forming unbidden. "This doesn't erase the past." Kane revved once, water spraying from tires. "Never said it did, just don't let the road take her too." He throttled into the night, taillight fading like a receding promise, leaving the lot to its vigil. The blood arrived in the ER moments later, Dr. Vasquez overseeing the transfusion with steady hands, Zoe's vitals stabilizing as the rare type coursed through her veins. A lifeline from the unlikeliest source. Word spread through the chapters like a relay. More donors en route. But Kane's gift was the anchor. Riders shared nods of respect, the fracture mending not with words but action, the iron promise emblem gleaming wet under the storm. Lena leaned against Mark in the room, watching the rain etch patterns on the glass. "He came back," she murmured, awe threading her voice. Mark squeezed her hand, the scars on his knuckles, a map of battles won and lost. Redemption wasn't a clean slate. It was showing up when the thunder rolled, binding the broken with threads of quiet honor. Yet as the night wore on, a new shadow loomed. Jax's radio crackled with urgency, a scout reporting flares up north, the same sheriff's blockade turning ugly. Badges demanding manifests on the unlawful assembly, corruption's tendrils, old as the club's feuds, snaking in to test the convoy's resolve. Mark's jaw tightened. Zoe was breathing steadier, but the Brotherhood's ride was far from over. The rain pounded harder, washing the lot clean, but some stains ran deep, loyalty's true trial just igniting in the storm's heart. The rain hammered the hospital roof like a relentless drumbeat, turning the parking lot into a slick mirror of reflected taillights and puddles that swallowed bootprints whole. Inside Zoe's room, the monitors traced a steadier rhythm now, the fresh transfusion weaving through her veins like threads of iron resolve. Dr. Vasquez adjusted the IV drip, her gloved hands precise under the soft glow of the overhead light, while Lena sat vigil in the corner chair, her eyes red-rimmed but lifted from the abyss. Mark lingered by the window, the cool glass fogging with his breath, watching the convoy below huddle under tarps and awnings, leathers glistening, faces etched with the quiet ferocity of men who'd trade chrome for salvation. Jax's radio hissed again, cutting through the patter outside. Scouts confirming. Blockade at mile marker 47. 2 cruisers, lights flashing like they're hunting ghosts. Sheriff Harlan's boys, same crew that shook us down last spring over the shelter run. Mark's grip tightened on the sill, knuckles whitening against the scars that mapped his hands. Harlan's department had long eyed the iron promise with suspicion, painting their charity rides as covers for shadows the club had long outrun. But this was no turf skirmish. It was a lifeline under siege, riders delayed with blood that could tip the scales for more kids like Zoe, contingencies the doctors had whispered about in hushed tones. He pushed off the wall, the door whispering shut behind him as he descended the stairs 2 at a time, the stairwell's echo amplifying his pulse. Emerging into the storm, wind whipped rain across his face, sharp as accusations. The lot buzzed with low voices, Bear wiping water from his prosthetic, Rico checking tire pressure on an idling bike, Sparks barking orders to secure the testing gear. Jax met him halfway, water streaming from his beard like tears from a stone. They're holding our northern brothers, demanding IDs, searching saddlebags. Say it's a public safety check, but it's harassment. Plain as the badge on Harlan's chest. Mark's jaw set, the old fire flickering in his chest. 5 years ago, he'd ridden away from the club's endless dances with the law, trading adrenaline for oil changes and bedtime stories. But the promise pulled like a throttle cable, unyielding. We go around. Back roads through the pines. Rico. You know the cuts? The mechanic nodded, rain beading on his bandana, his hands steady now with purpose. Can thread 20 through without a trace, but if they tail... Jax cut in, voice a low thunder. Then we stand. No blood spilled, but no backing down. The oath holds for the girl and for us. Word rippled through the ranks like a chain reaction, engines coughing to life in the downpour, headlights slicing fog-shrouded paths. A dozen riders peeled off first, tires hissing on wet asphalt as they vanished into the night, bound for the shadowed trails that skirted the law's reach. Mark mounted his own bike, the familiar weight grounding him, the engine's growl a balm against the chaos. Lena appeared at the ER doors, umbrella forgotten in her haste, her voice carrying over the roar. Mark, Zoe's colors better, the doctor's hopeful. He revved once, a nod his reply, the rain masking the knot in his throat. For her, he'd navigate any storm. The convoy split, a calculated fracture to evade the net. Mark led the core group toward a secondary clinic 20 miles out, Echo Valley Urgent Care, where reports had flagged another potential donor from the mountain chapter. The road unwound like a black ribbon under Wiper's frantic swipe, pines looming as dark sentinels, their needles whispering secrets to the wind. Jax rode flank, his massive frame cutting the spray, while Bear brought up the rear, his single headlight a defiant beacon. No words passed helmets. The bond spoke in the synchronized thunder, a symphony of loyalty forged in crises past. At the blockade's shadow miles behind, tension simmered unseen. The northern riders, hardened vets from the high deserts, faced down the flashing blues, with engines idling low, a wall of chrome against authority's glare. Sheriff Harlan himself stepped from his cruiser, raincoat flapping like a cape of false justice, his flashlight sweeping vests for imagined sins. "Unlawful gathering," he barked, voice amplified over the storm. "Shut it down or face dispersal." Tommy's second, a wiry prospect named Lee, dismounted slow, hands visible, his voice steady as rebar. "We're donors, Sheriff, heading to clinics. Kid's life on the line. No trouble here." Harlan's eyes narrowed, the corruption in his gaze as plain as the bribe money that lined his pockets from real shadows. Developers buying silence on polluted runs, not the club's quiet aid to the forgotten. But the riders held, a human barricade of resolve, radios silent, but relaying coordinates for the bypass. One by one the lawmen backed off, grumbling citations that dissolved in the rain, the convoy breaking free like a river carving stone. Blood bags secured in insulated packs, they roared south, merging with the ether of the night. Back at Santa Esperanza, dawn crept in grey and reluctant, painting the lot in muted silvers. Zoe stirred for the first time since the collapse, her eyelids fluttering open to the sterile white of the room. "Mom," she murmured, voice a fragile thread, Lena's sob breaking the hush as she leaned in, smoothing curls damp with fever's retreat. Dr. Vasquez entered, chart in hand, her smile tentative but real. Vitals are holding, the transfusion's taking, bleeding's clotted. She's out of the woods for now. Mark, returning soaked and spent, paused in the doorway, the sight hitting him like sunlight after endless night. He crossed to the bed, his rough hand enveloping her small one, the warmth of victory etched in silence. Outside, the full muster reconvened, riders from the evasion dripping onto the pavement, bags of screened blood handed off like sacred relics. Jax clasped Mark's forearm, the grip sealing the unspoken. The road had tested them, bent but unbroken. Whispers of Harlan's retreat spread, a poetic justice in the club's unyielding front. No fists, just the weight of their purpose exposing the sheriff's hollow bluster. Vance Kane's donation had been the spark, But the Brotherhood's fire burned brighter, mending rifts with actions that echoed louder than old wars. As the sun breached the clouds, casting golden edges on wet chrome, Zoe managed a weak smile at Mark's tattooed arm. "When I get big, can I ride with you?" He chuckled, the sound rough but warm, rain's patter fading to birdsong. "Count on it, kid. The promise is yours." The hospital stirred to morning life, nurses bustling past the lingering convoy, gratitude in their nods. But shadows lingered. Harlan's grudge wasn't quenched, and Zoe's recovery was a fragile dawn. The iron promise rode on. Guardians of oaths that outlasted storms, weaving redemption into the fabric of a world too quick to forget honor's quiet roar. If this chapter's got your heart revving like an old Harley, hit that like button to show your support. Let's keep these stories of unbreakable bonds rolling strong. The morning sun filtered through the hospital blinds in slanted shafts, warming the sterile chill of Zoe's room and casting long shadows that danced like fading echoes of the night storm. She lay propped on pillows, her color returning in faint roses to her cheeks, the monitors now a steady hum rather than a frantic alarm. Lena hovered nearby, spooning sips of clear broth into her daughter's mouth, her movements tender, as if each swallow rebuilt the world they'd nearly lost. Mark stood at the foot of the bed, arms crossed, the damp flannel of his shirt clinging from the ride back, but his eyes held a quiet victory, hard won, etched in the lines around them. Outside, the parking lot stirred with the slow dispersal of the convoy, engines coughing awake in a symphony of reluctant goodbyes. Jax leaned against his Harley, wiping condensation from the tank with a rag that smelled of oil and earth, his gaze fixed on the horizon where the pines met the sky. "Harlan's not done," he said as Mark joined him, the gravel still slick underfoot from the night's deluge. Words filtering in. "He's spinning tales to the state boys, calling our rally a threat to public order. If he pushes, it could drag the club into audits, freeze our runs." Mark nodded, the weight settling like a saddlebag on his shoulders. The iron promise had danced this edge before, balancing aid for the overlooked against badges greased by bigger fish, corporate polluters who funneled cash to silence environmental sins, leaving small towns like Willow Creek to choke on the fallout. Bear ambled over, his prosthetic clicking softly, a thermos of coffee extended like an olive branch. Scouts say he's got a tip line hot, painting us as vigilantes hoarding blood for some underground deal. The big man's laugh was a rumble, devoid of humor, his eyes shadowed by the memory of his own losses. Rico tinkered nearby, adjusting a loose chain on Spark's bike, the metallic clinks punctuating the morning's hush. "We stood clean last night. No searches turned dirt. But if he leans on the hospital—" Sparks straightened, her bandana askew, wiping grease from her palms. "Then we lean back. Quiet. Witnesses from the ER, docs who saw the donations. Truth's our throttle." Inside, Dr. Vasquez entered with a clipboard, her steps measured, the faint scent of hand sanitizer trailing her. "Zoe's responding well, the bleed sealed, and with the reserves from your donors, we're monitoring for complications. But I have to ask, how did you mobilize so fast? It's unprecedented." Mark met her gaze, the words forming like exhaust in the cool air. "Old promises, Doc, the kind that don't rust." She nodded, a flicker of understanding crossing her features. She'd seen enough night shifts to know not all heroes wore white coats. As she left, Lena pulled Mark aside, her hand on his arm, fingers tracing the faded tattoo of a chain link. "The club's staying. After everything." He cupped her face, the calluses rough against her skin. "For her. For us." Harlan's grudge is old news, traces back to that warehouse fire the club helped contain years ago, when his cousin's crew got pinched for arson cover-ups. He sees us as the thorn. Lena's eyes widened, pieces clicking like a puzzle long scattered. Zoe had been caught in the fringes of that world once, before Mark stepped in, her biological father tangled in petty schemes that left bruises hidden under long sleeves. "Then end it clean," she whispered. "No more shadows for her to grow up in." The day unfolded in a tense rhythm, riders lingering in shifts to guard the perimeter, eyes on the access roads, radios tuned to frequencies that hummed with vigilance. By noon, A state inspector arrived, badge gleaming under the sun, his cruiser idling like a predator at bay. Harlan trailed behind, his raincoat traded for a pressed uniform that strained at the seams, face set in a mask of officialdom. "Routine follow-up," the inspector announced at the ER desk, voice clipped, but his eyes darted to the cluster of bikes still parked like a defiant phalanx. Jax met them in the lobby, posture straight as a flagpole, his voice carrying the gravel of authority earned on back roads. "We're cooperating. Donations logged, witnesses plenty. Check the books." Tension coiled in the air, thick as the humidity rising from evaporating puddles. Harlan's gaze locked on Mark, emerging from the elevator with Zoe's chart in hand, a silent challenge passing between them. The sheriff's corruption an open secret in Willow Creek, his protection rackets squeezing local shops, while the club funneled aid to the same victims. "This your circus, Holloway?" Harlan sneered, stepping closer, the scent of cheap cologne cutting through the antiseptic. Mark held his ground, the lobby's fluorescent buzz amplifying the standoff. "It's a family matter. Yours is overstepping." The inspector cleared his throat, flipping through a tablet, the screen's glow reflecting his growing unease. Reports from satellite clinics poured in via email, donations verified, lives touched beyond Zoe, from accident victims to chemo patients. Sparks slipped in from the side, her phone discreetly recording, while Bear loomed in the doorway, a wall of quiet intimidation. Harlan pressed, demanding manifests, but the evidence mounted like a barricade, texts from nurses, timestamps of arrivals, the raw math of lives saved. "Public safety's my beat," he growled, but the bluster faltered as the inspector shook his head. "Looks legit, no cause for escalation." Defeat etched Harlan's features, a twitch at his jaw as he retreated to his cruiser, the engine's whine a petulant farewell. The lot exhaled, riders exchanging nods, justice not in clashes, but in the unyielding light of truth. Jax clasped Mark's shoulder, the grip firm, oath held, again. As the sun climbed higher, painting the chrome in fiery hues, Zoe called from her room, her voice stronger, asking for stories of the road. Mark returned, settling beside her, Lena on the other side, the three of them a unit forged anew. But whispers persisted, Harlan's radio crackling with calls to allies up the chain, a vendetta simmering beneath the surface. The club dispersed in waves, engines fading into the afternoon haze, yet the promise lingered, a thread pulling toward unseen trials. Vance Kane's shadow crossed Mark's mind unbidden, the ex-rival's donation a crack in the armor of old hates, hinting at alliances yet to form. Zoe squeezed his hand, her eyes bright with curiosity. "Did the bikers really come for me?" He smiled, the warmth chasing the chill. "Everyone, and they'd do it again." The hospital hummed on, a bastion of fragile hopes, while outside, the road whispered of battles yet to ride, redemption's path twisting toward a horizon where loyalty would face its deepest test. The afternoon sun hung low over Willow Creek, casting elongated shadows across the hospital grounds where the last of the Iron Promise riders lingered like embers refusing to die. Mark eased his bike into a spot near the entrance, the engine's final rumble fading into the chirp of settling birds, the air still heavy with the scent of wet earth and distant pine sap. Inside, Zoe's room felt smaller now, warmed by the golden light slanting through half-drawn blinds, her laughter, a faint tinkling sound bubbling up as Lena recounted a sanitized tale of the night's convoy, omitting the storm's fury and the sheriff's glare. Zoe propped on her elbows, IV line tugging gently at her arm, her eyes wide with the wonder of a child piecing together legends from whispers. Mark paused in the doorway, the leather of his vest creaking softly, a faint smile cracking the fatigue etched into his features. "Sounds like you missed the best part, kid," he said, crossing to the bed in 2 strides, his boots leaving faint damp prints on the linoleum. He settled on the edge, the mattress dipping under his weight, and took her hand, small and warm now, no longer the icy grip of crisis. Those bikes. They weren't just machines, they were promises on wheels, rolling in from every corner to keep you here. Zoe's gaze flicked to the window, where a single Harley idled in the lot, Rico's, tinkering under the hood like a guardian at rest. "Will they teach me to ride someday?" she asked, her voice gaining strength, laced with the innocent fire that had first hooked Mark's wandering heart. Lena's hand found his knee, a silent anchor amid the room's quiet beeps and the distant murmur of carts rolling down the hall. But the peace fractured with a knock, sharp, insistent. "Doctor." Vasquez entered, her expression a mask of professional calm, though her eyes carried the weight of unspoken consultations. "Good news on the labs, Zoe. You're clear for discharge in a day or two, provided we monitor that marker closely. But Mr. Holloway—" She glanced at the door, lowering her voice as if the walls might eavesdrop. "We've had a call from County Health Services. They're auditing the donations. Routine, they say, but timed suspiciously after last night's events." Mark's jaw tightened, the old scars on his knuckles itching like a warning. Harlan's retreat hadn't been surrender. It was a regroup, tendrils of influence snaking through bureaucratic channels to choke the club's lifeline. Outside, the lot's hush broke with the low growl of approaching engines. Not the full thunder, but a scout trio, dust kicking up from the access road. Jax dismounted first, his boots splashing residual puddles, a rolled paper clutched in his fist like a gauntlet thrown. He met Mark in the corridor, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, casting harsh angles on his weathered face. "Harlan's playing dirty." Jax rumbled, unfolding the document, a notice of impound for unpermitted assembly vehicles, laced with fines that could cripple the club's aid fund. "He's got the state leaning on us, claiming the rally disrupted emergency services. Lies, all of it, but it'll tie up our rides for weeks, right when shelters need our hauls." Mark's pulse quickened, the air in the hallway thickening with the faint tang of antiseptic and simmering resolve. He'd walked this line before, in the aftermath of the warehouse blaze, when Harlan's kin had torched evidence of their graft, and Iron Promise riders had pulled innocents from the flames, earning enmity that festered like road rash. "We fight it clean," he said, voice steady as a low idol. "Get the doc's statements, the clinic logs. Show him the blood saved lives, not headlines." Jax nodded, but his eyes darkened with the shadow of deeper cuts. "And Kane. Word's out. He's been asking around the fringes, offering to testify if it comes to hearings. Says he owes the road one clean turn." The name hung between them, a ghost revived. Vance Kane, the man whose blood had bridged the chasm, now extending a hand from the shadows. Mark's mind flashed to the rain-slicked lot, Kane's tail light vanishing into the night, a rival's grace that had mended more than Zoe's veins. Redemption wasn't a solo ride. It was this, unlikely alliances forged in the crucible of necessity. Back in the room, Lena caught the tension in his posture as he returned, her brow furrowing. "Trouble?" she asked, Zoe dozing now, her breaths even, a stuffed bear clutched to her chest, the one Mark had won at a county fair, its fur worn from tiny hugs. He sank into the chair, the vinyl sighing under him, and recounted the audit in hushed tones, the words tasting like gravel. Lena's face paled, memories surfacing of her ex's entanglements, the petty thefts that had left Zoe with faint echoes of fear, hidden under playground scrapes. "Harlan's always hated folks like us, folks who don't bow," she said, her voice a quiet steel. "But the club, you've given her a family that fights fair." Mark reached for her hand, the connection a circuit closing, grounding the storm brewing outside. The Iron Promise wasn't flawless. Scars from old runs, regrets buried under patches. But it was chosen, unbreakable, a vow that outlasted blood ties. As evening crept in, painting the sky in bruised indigos, the scout riders revved away, bound for the club's outpost to rally legal aid, old vet contacts who'd traded battlefields for courtrooms. Jax lingered, sharing a smoke on the bench by the entrance, the ember glowing like a distant headlight. This could drag, brother. Harlan's got pull, developers whispering in his ear, wanting our land for some strip mall that had poisoned the creek. Mark exhaled smoke into the cooling air, the bitterness mirroring the fight ahead. Justice here wasn't swift. It was a long haul, pedal to the metal against corruption's drag. But for Zoe, dreaming of open roads in her sleep, he'd throttle through. Inside, the nurse adjusted Zoe's blanket, the soft rustle a counterpoint to the rising wind outside, carrying hints of another front rolling in. Lena leaned against Mark, her head on his shoulder, the weight shared now. "Promise me we'll end this clean. For her," she murmured. He nodded, the oath sealing like solder on a frame. The hospital lights flickered on one by one, beacons in the gathering dusk, while across town, radios crackled with the club's quiet mobilization, a web of loyalty spinning wider, ready to ensnare the shadows threatening their hard-won light. Vance Kane's offer echoed in Mark's thoughts, a wild card in the deck, hinting that even fractured pasts could fuel the ride forward. The night deepened, engines stirring faintly in the distance, the promise enduring as the first stars pierced the veil, a brotherhood's fire, unquenched, burning toward dawn's reckoning. The evening shadows stretched long across Willow Creek as Mark guided his Harley through the winding back roads, the engine's steady thrum a counterpoint to the tension coiling in his chest. Jax rode beside him, the two bikes cutting through the cooling dusk like arrows loosed from a shared bow, headlights carving paths through the gathering twilight. Behind them, a lean escort of 5 riders flanked the convoy, Rico leading with his toolkit strapped secure, Spark scouting ahead on her nimble Sportster, her silhouette sharp against the fading sun. The impound notice burned in Mark's saddlebag, its paper edges frayed like the sheriff's grip on power. But tonight wasn't for confrontation. It was for gathering the ammunition that would dismantle Harlan's web without a single raised fist. They pulled into the Iron Promise outpost on the town's edge, a weathered barn converted into a haven of polished chrome and stacked crates, the air thick with the scent of aged leather and fresh brewed coffee from a communal pot. Inside, the chapter leaders waited, faces illuminated by the warm glow of hanging bulbs that swayed gently from the rafters. Tommy Bear Rollins stood at a makeshift table, maps and documents spread like battle plans, his massive frame casting a shadow that swallowed half the room. "Got the logs from every clinic," Bear rumbled as Mark dismounted, handing over a thick folder stamped with hospital seals. Donations tallied, over 200 units pulled last night alone, saved Zoe and 3 others in transit, a crash victim from the interstate, an elder at Pine Hollow with the same bleed. Jax flipped through the pages, his salt and pepper beard twitching with a rare glint of satisfaction. The evidence painted a vivid portrait. Timestamps of arrivals synced with radio calls, nurse affidavits detailing the rush of compatible blood that had turned triage rooms from despair to dawn. No shadows, no slight, just raw, unfiltered loyalty laid bare. Sparks leaned in, her braided hair catching the light, phone in hand with recordings from the blockade standoff. Harlan's deputies backing down under the weight of unyielding calm, their bluster dissolving like mist before the club's quiet front. "And the vets?" Mark asked, his voice gravel over the low murmur of assembling riders. "They're in," Rico confirmed, wiping his hands on a rag stained with grease. The club's legal allies, former soldiers turned advocates, their suits as sharp as their memories of foxholes, had mobilized from the city, drafting motions to quash the impound and expose Harlan's overreach. Whispers tied the sheriff to the developers circling Willow Creek, backroom deals to raise the old mill site for a toxic outlet, silencing protests with fines and fear. Iron Promise runs had fed those same protesters, hauling supplies to tent cities by the polluted river, earning Harlan's venom like a badge of honor. "They'll file by morning," Rico added, with Kane's statement attached. "Man's got details on Harlan's old rackets, witnessed a payoff years back, stayed silent till now." Vance Kane's name lingered in the air, a bridge from enmity to alliance, his offer relayed through a neutral channel that morning. A burner phone left at the auto shop. Mark had hesitated at first, the scar of betrayal itching, but the road's code was clear, debts paid in full, even from unlikely hands. Kane's testimony could crack the sheriff's facade wide, revealing the rot beneath the uniform, the protection money funneled from corporate greed, leaving families like Lena's to scrape by on the fringes. As the group pored over strategies, the outpost filled with the soft clink of beer bottles passed in quiet toasts, not to revelry but resolve, the wooden beams creaking under the weight of stories shared, lost rides redeemed, oaths that bent but never broke. Dawn broke crisp over Santa Esperanza Hospital, the sun gilding the treetops in amber, as Mark wheeled into the lot, the folder tucked under his arm like a talisman. Zoe was up, perched on the bed's edge in loose scrubs, her curls tied back with a ribbon Lena had knotted with trembling fingers. The girl's laughter rang clear as she colored a crude drawing of a convoy thundering across a crayon-blue sky. The monitors silenced now, their cables coiled away like shedskins. "Look, Dad, it's you and the bikers," she exclaimed, thrusting the paper forward, her eyes sparkling with the unscarred joy of survival. Mark knelt, the paper crinkling in his grasp, emotion thickening his throat. "Perfect, kid. That's us, family on the move." Lena stood by the window, arms wrapped around herself, the morning light softening the worry lines that had deepened overnight. "The discharge papers are ready. Home by noon." But her gaze flicked to the folder, reading the unspoken. Before Mark could speak, the lobby doors swung open below, admitting a cluster of suited figures. The vets, briefcases in hand, flanked by a county clerk whose face paled at the sight of lingering iron promise patches. Harlan arrived minutes later, cruiser screeching to a halt, his uniform crisp, but his posture sagging under the inevitability. He stormed the admin offices, demanding the audit's acceleration, but the clerk met him with a tablet glowing with filings, motions filed, evidence uploaded, Kane's affidavit digitized and damning. The confrontation unfolded in the sterile conference room, glass walls fogging with the heat of raised voices. Harlan pounded the table, his face flushing crimson. "This club's a menace, disrupting order, endangering the public." But the lead advocate, a silver-haired vet named Ellis with a limp from Nam, slid the folder across, his voice even as worn asphalt. "Order? Like shaking down mill workers for developer hush money? We've got witnesses, logs, even your old associate Kane flipping the script. The donations? They saved lives. Your blockade nearly cost them." Harlan's bluster crumbled, eyes darting to the window where riders gathered subtly, not in threat, but testimony. Bear's steady gaze, Sparks's poised stance, Jax's unyielding presence. By midday, the sheriff slunk away. The impound lifted, audit shelved under the glare of impending probes, state oversight sniffing at his ledgers, the developer's ties unraveling like frayed ropes. Justice arrived not in thunder, but in the quiet click of legal locks turning, the truth's engine revving past corruption's stall. Zoe rode home in Mark's pickup, the wind through the open window tousling her hair, Lena's hand in his on the gearshift. The club dispersed to their chapters, but the bond hummed stronger. Vance Kane's lone bike spotted on the horizon, a nod exchanged at a crossroads, old scars fading into shared roads ahead. Weeks blurred into healing rhythms. Zoe back at school, her desk adorned with a tiny iron promise keychain. Dreams of rides whispered over dinner. Mark returned to the shop, but the radio stayed close, a lifeline to the brotherhood that had woven him whole. Harlan's resignation hit the local feeds quietly, resigned to personal matters, his allies scattering like smoke. The creek ran clearer, mill workers breathing easier, the club's runs unhindered, carrying hope to forgotten corners. In the quiet of a starlit evening, Mark stood on the porch, Zoe asleep inside, Lena's warmth at his side. The road stretched dark and inviting, a promise unbroken. "We made it," she murmured, her head on his shoulder. He nodded, the night air carrying the faint echo of distant engines. A legacy of loyalty, redemption's roar echoing into forever. Thanks for riding along on this journey of unbreakable promises and chosen family. If these stories of honor and heart move you, hit that subscribe button and join us for more tales from the road. Your support keeps the engines running.